Hi, my name is Ford Stolp, and this is my investment exercise video project. I did 3 companies: Netflix, Texas Instruments, and DoorDash, starting with the business model canvases portion, which was the biggest portion of my project. So, starting with Netflix, I learned that the most expensive activity for Netflix was their original content production and their acquisitions. This by far is more expensive than their platform maintenance, their marketing, their partnership management, or anything else that they're spending money on, whether that be employee salaries, licensing, technology, infrastructure, etc. Also, they are currently attempting to purchase Warner Bros., which will greatly expand their content library, making it easier for their content creators to make new content because they'll be able to work with DC Universe and whatnot. There are certain government regulators who may try to stop that, but it will probably go through. And also, people are okay with paying for ads, seeing ads in Netflix now if they get lower prices. When streaming first started, people hated ads, but people are more okay with it now if the prices are lower. And moving on to the Texas Instruments business canvas summary, I learned that first off, they make semiconductors, not calculators. That's what I thought that they made, honestly, calculators. But they actually make semiconductors, and they do all of their manufacturing in-house, which allows them to have a much greater quality assurance over their competitors. They also do all of their own packaging, testing, and customer support. And also they have lots of long-term partnerships, especially with educational institutions, which is one of the reasons that they are able to stay in business. And then finally, we have DoorDash. I learned that while they are the market leader in North America, they are actually not the market leader globally. And restaurants with lots of orders can get better commissions. Moving on to the SWOT analysis. So starting with Netflix. They have a very strong original content portfolio. They have cross-device availability, meaning you can stream on your phone, your laptop, or your tablet. And there's also subscription flexibility. So if you are short for cash one month, you can change to a different subscription or cancel it for 1 month. The weaknesses are the high production content, or the high content production costs, the lack of content in news, sports, and live TV. However, that is changing occasionally with some streaming services. And opportunities that they have, there is a fast growth of ad-supported streaming, as I mentioned earlier, and the potential for live entertainment. For instance, they have a lot of comedians doing original specials on Netflix. They could stream those live for the first time as an opportunity that they have. Threats is intense competition from other streaming services, piracy, high prices driving away customers, and regulations in certain areas can hurt growth, forced censorship. And the Texas Instruments SWOT analysis, they have market leadership in semiconductors, a diverse product portfolio, and a long product life cycle, as well as their in-house manufacturing is probably their greatest strength. Weaknesses, they have limited presence in they have a very limited presence in AI markets. So as we move on into like this new digital age, they don't have as much power there. And they have a high capital investment requirement. However, an opportunity that they have is emerging robotic technologies require analog sensors and embedded controls, which Texas Instruments works on. And TI components also can go in electric vehicles. So as energy goes green, semiconductors are going to be more required. Threats, geopolitical risks can affect the supply chain. So, because they do a lot of their manufacturing overseas and then ship it across the globe, depending on what's going on politically, they might not be able to do that shipping. And environmental restraints can also halt manufacturing. For DoorDash, their strengths, as I mentioned earlier, they have market leadership in North America and a strong customer loyalty program, a user-friendly app, and a great customer support team. Lots of orders are gotten wrong, and if you get an order wrong on DoorDash, you can basically just request a new one and you'll get it. Weaknesses, they have very thin margins and a high reliance on flaky gig workers. They have a high risk of customer dissatisfaction and a reliance on third-party merchants. But they're essentially contracting out all of their labor, so there is going to be a high risk of that labor going bad when there's no training for it. Kind of what you get. Opportunities, expansion into retail and convenience delivery, the growth of grocery delivery, and corporate partnerships. Threats is intense competition from other delivery apps like Uber Eats and Postmates. There's also merchant pushback over high fees and tech disruptions. And now we're moving on to the Pestel analysis. So politically, or starting with Netflix. So politically, government regulations of media and streaming, depending on which country you're in, can definitely affect what you're going to be able to watch. And then economic, high cost of production. And then social, controversial content can occasionally cause boycotts. There isn't much environmental impact of Netflix. However, there is a lot of energy consumption depending on how you're consuming Netflix. And then there's also a lot of legal requirements with licensing agreements and intellectual property laws. And then Texas Instruments. I think the biggest standout here in the Pestel analysis are the economic. Here, the capital costs. Semiconductor manufacturing requires huge startup investments, and inflation increases the cost of everything, making expansion difficult. And the biggest standout from the DoorDash Pestel analysis is the gig worker legislation. Some companies may be soon required to provide benefits to drivers, which will push prices up. But prices are already pretty high. DoorDash has been raising them pretty regularly. So if they go up a little bit, I don't think Americans will stop paying those prices. Moving on to Porter's 5 Forces. From Netflix, the biggest standout here is the threat of substitutes. There are lots of substitutes for Netflix, whether they be Disney Plus or Hulu, or many other, there are even free ones like YouTube. And moving on to Texas Instruments, the biggest standout here is, I would say, the potential for new entrants into an industry. It's very low because it requires a lot of startup capital. So they have rivals now, yes, but the current rivals are probably going to stay their rivals. It's not going to change. And then for DoorDash, the biggest standout from the Porter's 5 Forces analysis would be the customer power. It's very easy for buyers to use a different service, so DoorDash has to compete with all the other services, yet they're still able to function with high prices. And then moving on to the additional questions at the end. First, I learned that Netflix is about to buy Warner Bros., which owns HBO. This will be a huge shakeup in the streaming industry. If the sale becomes final and no regulators get involved, Netflix will benefit greatly with new IP for original content. I learned about Texas Instruments' exclusivity deals and what they produced. I also learned about their in-house production methods. All I knew about them before the project was from calculator cases. I learned that while DoorDash is the market leader here in the United States, that is not the case worldwide. I think the most important part of this project was looking at all the business model summaries side by side. This is moving on to the second question. I think the most important part of this project was looking at all of the business model summaries side by side once I had written them out. They seem very similar. I think this must be intentional, but it seems like they're all almost different ways of laying out the same information, and if I pick 2 or 3 of the 4, I should have all my bases covered. This might sound crazy to a business professor. Thank you.